If you have ever had the thought, God, I'd love to change the world, you must watch today's episode because Bill Liao is going to tell you how to do it.
Hey there, welcome to Be Unmessable with the podcast. I'm your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio, and today my guest is Bill Liao. He is a prominent Australian entrepreneur. He's a venture capitalist and a philanthropist, and he's a venture partner at SOSV, and he co-founded Coder Dojo, which is a global movement to teach young people how to code. Liao is passionate about technology, sustainability, and social impact, and he's been a driving force behind numerous successful startups and initiatives. And I can't wait to have this conversation with him. He has a real passion for making a difference. So let's welcome to the show, Bill Liao. So welcome to the show, Bill. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure, Josselyne. My pleasure. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Although whenever people are listening to this, it may be way past the New Year, but maybe it's Happy Chinese New Year or Happy something New Year somewhere, right?
Well, it can always be a new year. All you have to do is choose that.
That's right. The calendar is a construct of human creation, so we can create New Year's right now and right now. I love it. So, I talked a little bit in the intro about, some of the successful ventures that you've been involved with, but tell us, I know you have a vast history with many companies and nonprofits and initiatives, but what would you say has been the pathway that brought you here? Because you probably didn't get born thinking, oh, I want to help companies and I want to, to impact the planet. What was the pathway that brought you to what you're doing now?
So my core values are kindness, curiosity, and getting shit done. And then family and civilization after that. And I think I've always had the curiosity bug from a very early age. And I think those values have served me very well. Each of the things that I've achieved is the end point or the midpoint of a story that began with some problem that needed to be addressed. So if I look at why I went into the computer industry, it's because I dropped out of high school and I needed something to do that paid money.
That would be a problem, yeah, to solve.
If I look at what made me quit my boring dead-end tech job and start my first company, it was because I made a pledge to the Hunger Project that I couldn't fulfill within the means that I had. And so I had to create a new set of means to fulfill that pledge. And that started me on the entrepreneurship journey. My daughter at one point asked me, Daddy, you broke the planet, you better fix it. And that's what started the We Forest journey. And 100 million trees growing in the ground later, I could say that was a very useful thing for her to ask.
Yeah, well, out of the mouths of
Each of
babes,
these,
if we listened to our children, we probably wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now.
yeah, I would actually say that we shouldn't have to listen to our children in order to solve the problem, and we shouldn't leave it up to them to solve either. I mean, as we are the most wealthy, powerful, empowered generations of humans the planet has ever seen. And it would be shoddy of us to leave the fixing of the problems that we've created to our children.
I am with you.
I'm glad, and I hope many others will be too.
And I have
So
my
yeah,
children all the time talking about the problems that seem unsolvable,
yes.
but too bad they aren't. They just seem unsolvable. Just like every problem that you've ever solved seemed unsolvable at one point until it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, there are no problems in the present moment. Uh, uh, I remember once getting into a taxi in Berlin with it was the last taxi, so I offered the lady in the queue behind me if she'd like to join me into town, and she said yes. And we sped off, and we got sort of round two corners and then went straight into traffic. And the taxi driver was like, "Oi, oi, oi, problem, problem." And the lady who was with me said in a very stern German voice, "Ist kein Problem. Ist ein Fact."
Yes, very good. Yes. Again, problems are a construct of human beings in language. Without language, there are no problems. There is just what is at that moment. I
Yeah.
love it.
And it's actually very useful to approach life that way, because a lot of people get stopped by problems. And and to use your own parlance, problems mess with them.
Yes.
And what's really unfortunate about that is that because the problem, even if somebody else has given it to you, is a construct, and you've adopted it as a construct, you're actually being stopped by something that isn't really there. And that has a benefit. It means if you can rephrase it and reinterpret it and choose a different way to be about it, then that problem can evaporate. It also is the painful irony that we create our obstacles and we let them mess with us.
You know, it's interesting. When I used to lead the advanced course at Landmark, we had, or maybe it was in the forum, I can't remember now, but it was a whole conversation about problems, and that to be alive is to have problems. No problems, no life. But the problem is that most of your problems are boring, little tiny problems, like, oh, I don't want to be embarrassed, or, oh, I have to be right. So what if you could create a problem? And this is to your point about reframing the view of problems, rather than it's a problem to have problems. It's like, no, that is the game of life. So the quality of your life is given by the problems you create to solve, meaning, to engage with. So we forest, if you look at, planting 100 million trees, it isn't inherently a problem, but if you create it, and I like to use the word game, as the game you're going to play, it's like, okay, this is what I'm, solving, or this is what I'm tackling, or this is what I'm creating. Then you have a problem worth your life. Most people don't have problems worth their life.
Yes. I would say further to that, that if you are lucky enough to be able to take on a problem that is of service to a great many people and is a lot larger than yourself, there's a huge degree of satisfaction to be had in doing that. And your little problems, in comparison to the big problem, look very little indeed.
Or
I
disappear
remember
completely.
I remember being on a conference call swinging a deal for a startup that I was funding, and that deal ended up with them getting 30 million in funding for a thing that's likely going to change the world. And the parking ticket that I got for being in the spot over long because I was finishing this call uh, really didn't matter that much.
Yes, exactly. That's the context is decisive, and if you're in a big enough
Yes.
game, those little games that seemed so important when you weren't in a bigger game, a bigger context, all of a sudden either cease to exist or seem so small. Yeah. Petty.
Yeah, and I think that there's a really nasty side effect of the kind of homo deus, as Yuval Harari puts it, where we've kind of done away with God and made self-fulfillment the ultimate ideal. And actually, it's being of service to others that seems to generate the greatest level of satisfaction, not trying to self-fulfill. And you could argue semantics and say, oh, well, that's a different kind of self-fulfillment. Yes, and it's inherently involved in fulfilling for others. So when you explore a problem space, it's essential that you actually look at how does this make everything better for everyone? If you want to get the best possible satisfaction out of it, to wring the juice out of that life. And it's interesting too. We see this, you know, greatly this great preoccupation with self-fulfillment, ultimately leading to nothing like self-fulfillment.
Yeah, it's like a dopamine hit, but not much beyond it, you know?
Yes, yes, and I mean, scrolling can be an enormous distraction because it's lots of little quote unquote self-fulfillments, but actually all you're doing is fulfilling the marketing aspirations of whichever company that you're scrolling on.
Well, let me go back to what you just said about the self-fulfillment being, so the coin of the realm, let's just say right now, based on the agreement reality. But if you look at it like it's kind of self-fulfillment, if you identify self as this thing, this individual physical being called Bill or Josselyne or whoever, then
Yes.
it's a very small game, right? But if you constitute yourself, so this is where I can see it as an aspect of self fulfillment to make a difference and an impact. If you constitute yourself as the bigger whole, like as community or as society or as humanity, then it can be self fulfillment, but it's not about you as an individual. It includes you, but it's not about you. That can be a very big kind of and fulfilling kind of self fulfillment if you're not the little self, the small s self is where I would kind of think from it.
Yes and no. Um, when you look at it, it's actually very hard for people to constitute themselves necessarily bigger than they are. As like even as an intellectualization, that's a challenge. It is relatively easier to take on a problem that is bigger than you are. And I think as you begin to recruit others on your journey to solving the problem, there is a natural progression possible to make it about everyone rather than about just you. We do see, uh, that there is a trait of narcissism to also be concerned about, even if you're taking on a problem bigger than yourself, if you just take it on as you. So there is a need to have that evolution somewhere along the journey. At the same point, or to the same point though, starting that to starting out that way is tough. It's
Yeah,
very
it
tough to go,
definitely
I am
that's
actually this.
it requires transformation, which is not naturally embedded into life. It's got to be designed and caused. Yeah.
Also, in the timing of things, one thing I've discovered over the years is that action begets passion. You don't get passionate about something for real until you take action on it. And the more action you take and the more passionate you get, the more fuel for that transformative fire.
I love it.
Yeah. So if you can sort of head down the road a bit and then get some followers and get some collaborators and start to see yourself as people moving together in a movement towards that bigger common goal, then it's possible to slip into, hey, we, as opposed to I, are fulfilling our dream.
Yes, completely. And when you have worked with people, not just people who are out to impact, well, I guess everybody that you work with is probably out to impact some quality of life for people. If you look, what is it that messes with them the most? Because you're dealing with high performance people, not like Joe Schmo in the street. You're dealing with people who are up to something bigger than themselves. What stops them or messes with them in fulfilling their goals?
Um, I think one of the biggest ones is the natural uh, contextual slash epistemological immune system.
Say more. Say more. You're speaking. This is like porn to me. Whenever I speak to you, I feel like I just watched the best porn.
Okay, well, moving on.
Ontological porn. That's my language. My love language.
Yeah, so as an investor, as a VC, if you're good at your job, you look for things that seem like a bad idea when you first hear them, because that's the sign of something new. And there are a lot of structures in the world that are set up to try and not do something new.
Mm.
And whatever you're doing, when it's going to be so impactful, it's almost inevitably an upgrade of some kind. And there is an absolute resistance to upgrades and changes. People just don't like the inevitability of change. And so they try and hold on to the status quo. And I think more than anything, that messes with people in an enormous variety of ways, whether it's through FDA bureaucracy preventing a new treatment from being tried or costing billions, or whether it's some form of regulation, or whether it's just the trolls out there diving on, your initiative and leveraging that for their own personal aggrandizement at the cost of your movement. They're all kind of the immune system of the episteme.
Mm. So kind of like a caterpillar that goes to turn into a butterfly, and the immune system goes to kill that imaginal cell. That's
Yes,
the world.
or a bird tries and eats you.
Yes. Yes. You're either
Um,
going to eat yourself or be eaten.
yeah, exactly. And I think that what makes you unmessable with in that circumstance is a bias for action, a certainty that there is always a way. It may not be apparent, and there is always a way because creativity is pretty much unlimited, and stops are very limited. And as I said before, the passion, the unreasoning and unreasonable desire to make it work, and that's not for everyone, and yet it could be for everyone. Like, if anybody in their life looks around them at a problem that they think is unsolvable or insoluble, and they take those three traits, especially the bias for action, and put them to work, it is really, really possible to resolve almost anything.
Mm.
Now,
So let's talk about a
it's
situation that
not pain
you
free.
no, well, neither is going to the gym. You
Yeah,
can get abs of steel, but it isn't going to be pain free. That's for sure. Um,
exactly.
but that's the good kind of pain. It's sort of a
Yeah,
designed pain, or I call it a
yeah.
design discomfort. And if you're not
Well,
designing, yes,
it's about volition, right? If you have volition around it, then it's deal withable because you know that you could stop.
yes, I guess it's not like being in a torture camp where you don't have the stop button. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
clear. But to your point about, the bias for action and what has people be unmessable with, in terms of those three factors, when you look in your life at a situation that you dealt with that was really difficult, like could have taken you out of the game, messed with you to the point of no return, let's just say, but you were able to emerge from that situation and transcend the circumstances and emerge what I call being unmessable with, what comes to mind? What could you share with people? It always makes a difference for people to hear.
I mean, for me, that's basically Tuesday.
That's funny.
When you take on many big things, there's always something that's going to try and mess with you. Um, there are so many examples. It's hard to pick one. I think I shared one earlier. Do you have a?
You talked about having somebody, you talked about in what I had sent you, uh, getting somebody out of a mental ward.
Oh yes, yes. That was a very a very a very someone very close to me ended up committed because they were they had said that they might self-harm, and so they were literally locked up. And the state of mental health care had them on a fast track to getting shock therapy.
Mm,
And that was not okay with me because this person needs their memory, and that's one of the things that gets messed with ECT. And so, firstly, I was on the phone to them literally hours a day, every day, talking, communicating with them. And secondly, I was on the phone to the institution to get them out
yes.
before ECT was applied. And I actually created an entirely new way of looking at how you deal with emotions in the short term based on research that requires only short amounts of conversation to dispel a negative emotion. And through that conversation, through a short number of weeks, um, I was able to free my uh, very dear person to me from this circumstance, and they were able to actually reverse the issue,
Mm,
and they've been good ever since. And I can promise you that every aspect of the bureaucracy in that institution was trying to mess with them and with me. And it required an enormous amount of willpower to stay polite.
yes.
And it also required a lot of commitment to just continually be in conversation while at the same time developing a system that might work. And that's actually on my Medium account. It's called Deal with the Feels. And it's a very well researched system of looking at how can you reset your amygdala and hippocampi as quickly as possible.
We spoke about that on our last conversation. Is there anything you can share? I know it's not like a Cliff Note version, but if there's something you could share that's actionable for people to take away with today when they deal with the
Sure,
feels.
sure. Um, the easiest thing to know, the Cliff Notes version is this. The easiest thing to know is that your amygdala and hippocampi are where your emotions trigger. They trigger in 74 thousandths of a second. So in a race between your rational mind, 3 seconds, and your emotions, 74 thousandths of a second, the emotions are always going to win. And there's a good evolutionary reason for that. I mean, anybody, when a bear romped into the village to try and eat everybody, anyone who had a deep philosophical thought at that moment
Was
was
dead and eaten.
their tasty genome is a coprophyte at best, right?
Yes, they were lunch. Yes.
They were lunch. Um, so we're all not lunches. Like all of us are descended from the not lunch. So we have very quick emotional responses. In order to reset that emotion, the trap is you have an emotional response and then you think about it. The two most devilish words in the English language are why and but.
Yes.
Right?
Send you right
And
over to that world of being messable with and reaction. No question. One-way ticket.
exactly. So rather than thinking about it, asking the question why, or saying the word but, instead just try and physiologically reset it. Because interestingly, your hippocampi and amygdala are connected to your physical body much more directly than they are to your cortex. Even though you might think, oh, they're in the same part of my body, they're both in my skull. The distance, the number of neural pathways, the length of those pathways to get to your consciousness is meters. The length of pathway to get to your physiology is centimeters. So the quickest way to reset an emotion is to mimic what happens in real life. So let's say you're about to step off a curb, you look to your left, and a car whizzes past you, and you get a big fright. But then you realize the car has whizzed past you, and what do? You go, "Oh, thank goodness." And that oh, vibrates your vagus nerve, which directly tells your amygdala and your hippocampi, it's all cool. No need for the panic anymore. Well, the good thing about our base firmware, if you like, which has not been updated in probably a million plus years, is that it cannot tell the difference between reality and you're faking it. And so if you have an emotional response that you are uncomfortable with and it's not useful, all you have to do is literally go, oh, and simulate the surprise and the relief, and you will feel it. And what's even more interesting is that the speed of the reset is exactly as fast as the speed that it came on with.
Mm.
And you can have unlimited goes, right? You're just simulating the reset. The other thing to know is that because our emotional responses are so finely tuned, they false alarm all the time. And so things that really shouldn't trigger a fear response suddenly do. And if you go down the why did that happen route, you are going to end up reinforcing that. If you go down the, look around, no tigers, no bears, no cars, maybe I should just reset that fear. Oh. By the way, the order to a little fine tune, the frequency at which you sigh is best when you feel the tingle of your vagus nerve being vibrated by it, because your vagus nerve is all the way around your throat and your
Throat and
chest,
mm-hmm.
and it heads down to your gut, and it's huge. Like your vagus nerve is a goodly proportionate size of your brain. So if you can stimulate it, there is a lot of reset potential to be had.
This is, again, I feel like I'm definitely listening to porn, because this is all, the work that I do is about shifting from reaction to creation. And what you're describing is just a super, super simple hack, and rather than somebody having to create some elaborate hack, it's just super simple, takes no time or a second. And then they can reset to that space of creation and rational thought and where creativity can occur. So I love it. Makes me
Yeah,
happy to talk to you every time, Bill.
mutual. One other thing, if you're not in a position to make an audible sigh, in my Medium post, there are some words that you can tell yourself that will also assist. Um,
Well, we have to get the
and that,
Medium post so I can put it in the show notes along with your charities,
yeah,
so that
yeah,
people can
please.
find that. What is the
Yeah.
Medium? Just so you can say it and then I'll have it.
Um, Actually, I don't have a short link for it, but basically, if you go to medium.com and search for Liao, Liao, and the name of the post is Deal with the Feels.
Okay, I'll find it and I'll put the link in.
It's super easy. It's a long URL to try and recite over a interview though.
Yes, I get it. I'll put it in so it's simple for people to find, for sure. And is there anything else you want to leave people with as we wrap up this conversation, which I hope is the first of many? But anything you want to leave people with? Anything?
I think that the most important thing is don't wait for the miracle to happen to you. Be the miracle that other people need.
Beautiful, beautiful. Maybe we'll call this episode "Be the Miracle."
Excellent.
Yeah. And for those of you listening or watching, depending on how you get your podcast, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And, if you got value out of this conversation, which I can't imagine you didn't, if you listened to the conversation, there are so many golden nuggets. Please rate, review, share the episode, most importantly, with somebody that you think could have an impact in their life. And really, people in life want a problem bigger than they are. They just don't know it sometimes. So you could be the miracle by sharing this conversation with the people in your life so that they can get into a bigger game and start to really have the impact that they were born to make. So again, thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Bill. And thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Jocelyn.
And we'll see you on the next episode of Be Unmessable With, the podcast.
Thank you again for tuning in to this week's episode of Be Unmessable With the podcast. And I never take for granted that you spend time with me. And I always want to make sure that you get value when you do. So I am including in the show notes a link for you for our Basics of Being Unmessable With workbook. It's a 12-page workbook that gives you all the basics of developing yourself to be unmessable with no matter what life throws at you, to be able to shift from the world of reaction to creation on a dime. And it'll give you a whole practice that you can implement in your daily life over and over and over again. So click on the link below and grab that 12-page workbook and let me know what you discover as you engage with it. Have a great week.